The twin sons of Drakenris painted the sky in shades of orange and purple as they began their slow descent behind the volcanic mountains. Jiho pressed his small face against the observation window of Haven Station, watching the massive creatures circle in the distance. His mother called them Skywings, but Jiho thought they looked more like the dragons from his favorite storybooks back on Earth. The 8-year-old boy had been living on this strange planet for 6 months now. His mother, Hannah, was one of the lead scientists studying the native wildlife. She spent most of her days in the laboratory, examining samples and making detailed notes about everything she discovered. Jiho understood that her work was important, but it also meant he spent a lot of time alone with Mireille, the young pilot who had been assigned to watch him. Today was different, though. Mireille had been called away for an emergency supply run to the Northern Research Post. Hannah was deep in her lab work, running tests on some volcanic soil samples. The other colonists were busy with their own tasks. Nobody noticed when Jiho slipped out through the side airlock, his small backpack bouncing against his shoulders. The boy had explored the area around Haven Station many times before, always staying within the safe perimeter that Taeyong, the colony commander, had marked with bright orange markers. But today, something pulled him further. A strange humming sound echoed from the mountains, almost like singing. Jiho had never heard anything like it before. He walked past the orange markers, his heart beating faster with each step. The rocky ground crunched under his boots. Small lizards scattered as he passed, their scales glinting in the fading sunlight. The humming grew louder, drawing him toward a cluster of black rocks that jutted from the mountainside like broken teeth. Jiho climbed carefully over the rocks, using his hands to steady himself. His mother would be angry if she knew he had gone so far from the station. Taeyong would probably give him another lecture about safety protocols. But the sound was so beautiful, so haunting, that he couldn't turn back now. Behind the rocks, he found a cave entrance. It was wide enough for 3 grown men to walk through side by side. The humming echoed from deep within, bouncing off the stone walls. Jiho pulled his small flashlight from his backpack and clicked it on. The beam of light cut through the darkness, revealing a tunnel that sloped downward into the mountain. The boy took a deep breath and stepped inside. The air was warmer here, almost hot. It smelled like sulfur and something else, something wild and ancient. His footsteps echoed as he walked deeper into the cave. The humming had stopped, replaced by softer sounds. Chirping, like baby birds, but deeper, more resonant. The tunnel opened into a massive chamber. Jiho's eyes went wide. The walls glowed with a soft blue light from some kind of luminescent moss. In the center of the chamber, 3 small creatures huddled together on a bed of volcanic rock and dried grass. They were no bigger than large dogs, with scales that shimmered in the blue light. One had reddish scales that seemed to glow like embers. Another had blue-gray scales like storm clouds. The third had silver-white scales that looked like fresh snow. They were baby skywings. Hatchlings. Jiho stood frozen, hardly daring to breathe. The hatchlings noticed him immediately. They chirped louder, tilting their heads to look at him with large, curious eyes. The red one took a small step forward, its tiny wings unfurling slightly. Then Jiho heard it, a sound that made his blood run cold. A deep, rumbling growl that shook the very stones beneath his feet. From the shadows at the back of the chamber, she emerged. The mother. She was enormous, easily as big as the supply shuttle that had brought Jiho to Drakenris. Her scales were deep crimson, almost black in the dim light. Her eyes glowed like molten gold, fixed directly on the small human child who had invaded her nest. Kyra, though Jiho didn't know her name yet, lowered her massive head. Her lips pulled back, revealing teeth as long as Jiho's forearm. She took one thunderous step forward, then another. The ground shook with each movement. The hatchlings chirped nervously but didn't retreat. They seemed confused, looking between the mother and the strange visitor. Jiho wanted to run. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to turn and flee back through the tunnel. But he had learned in his xenobiology classes that running from predators often triggered their hunting instincts. His legs trembled. His hands shook. But he held still, pressing himself against the cave wall. Kyra roared. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. It echoed off the walls, seeming to come from everywhere at once. Jiho squeezed his eyes shut, certain that these would be his last moments. He thought of his mother, how sad she would be. He thought of Mireille, who would blame herself for leaving him alone. But the killing blow never came. When Jiho dared to open his eyes, he saw something unexpected. The hatchlings had moved. They weren't cowering behind their mother. Instead, they had waddled forward, closer to Jiho. The red one, the bravest of the three, was just a few feet away now, its nose twitching as it tried to catch his scent. Kyra's roar died to a low growl. Her golden eyes narrowed, watching her offspring with what looked like confusion. She took another step forward, positioning herself to grab her babies if needed. But she didn't attack. She waited. Jiho slowly, very slowly, began to back toward the tunnel entrance. His backpack scraped against the cave wall. The movement was too sudden. Kyra's head snapped toward him, her growl intensifying. Jiho froze again. The red hatchling chirped excitedly. It had noticed something. Jiho's backpack had come partially unzipped during his climb through the rocks. Something sparkled inside, catching the blue light from the moss. It was a small plastic container of craft glitter. Jiho had been carrying it for days, planning to make a birthday card for Mireille. He had forgotten it was even in his bag. The hatchling's eyes locked onto the sparkles. It chirped again, this time with a different tone. Eager, excited. The other two hatchlings noticed and joined in the chirping, all three of them fixated on the glittering container. Jiho's trembling hands moved to his backpack. Very carefully, he reached inside and pulled out the container. The movement caused Kyra to tense, her muscles coiling like springs ready to launch. But Jiho held the container up where all the dragons could see it. The glitter inside caught the light, creating tiny rainbows that danced across the cave walls. The hatchlings went silent, mesmerized. Even Kyra seemed transfixed for a moment, her golden eyes following the dancing lights. Then Jiho's sweaty fingers lost their grip. The container slipped from his hand and hit the ground. The lid popped off, and glitter spilled across the dark volcanic rock, spreading in a sparkling pool of gold, silver, pink, and blue. The hatchlings rushed forward as one. They ignored Jiho completely, their attention fixed on the magical sparkling substance that had appeared in their nest. They pawed at it with their small claws, sending up little clouds of glitter that stuck to their scales. The red one rolled in it, covering itself in sparkles. The blue-gray one sneezed when glitter went up its nose, then chirped with delight. The silver one carefully picked up pieces with its mouth, letting them fall and watching them catch the light. Jiho stood pressed against the wall, hardly believing what he was seeing. The fierce mother dragon who had nearly killed him moments ago was now standing still, watching her babies play with the human's gift. Her growl had faded completely. She looked at Jiho with those enormous golden eyes, and for just a moment, he could have sworn he saw something like understanding there. Kyra took a slow, deliberate step to the side. Not toward Jiho, not away from him. Just aside, creating a clear path between the human child and her hatchlings. It was an invitation, or perhaps a test. Jiho didn't move closer. He was terrified and amazed in equal measure. He watched as the hatchlings played, covering themselves in glitter until they looked like tiny flying jewels. He watched as Kyra settled onto her haunches, her tail curling protectively around the chamber but no longer blocking his exit. As the sun finally set outside and darkness filled the cave, Jiho knew he needed to leave before his mother discovered he was missing. He backed slowly toward the tunnel, never taking his eyes off the dragon family. The hatchlings were too absorbed in their new treasure to notice him go. But Kyra watched him every step of the way. Just before Jiho disappeared into the tunnel, the great dragon made a sound. Not a roar, not a growl. Something softer, almost gentle. A rumble that seemed to say, "Come back!" And somehow, Jiho knew he would. Jiho barely slept that night. He lay in his small bed in the residential wing of Haven Station, staring at the ceiling and thinking about the dragons, about the way the hatchlings had played with the glitter, about the way Kyra had stepped aside instead of attacking him. Nobody back on Earth would believe what had happened. When morning came, Jiho waited until his mother left for the laboratory. Hannah kissed his forehead and reminded him to stay inside the station until Mireille returned from her supply run. Jiho nodded and promised to be good. He hated lying to his mother, but he knew she would never let him go back to the cave if he told her the truth. As soon as Hannah disappeared down the corridor, Jiho grabbed his backpack. He had spent the early morning hours searching through the station's recreation room, gathering every bit of sparkling material he could find. He had 3 more containers of glitter in different colors. He had found some shiny glass beads in an old craft kit. There were strips of reflective safety tape that he carefully cut into smaller pieces. His backpack bulged with treasures. The walk to the cave felt shorter in daylight. Jiho moved quickly, his heart pounding with excitement and nervousness. What if Kyra had changed her mind? What if she attacked him as soon as he entered? But something deeper than logic told him he would be safe. The way she had looked at him, the soft rumble she had made, it meant something. He reached the cave entrance and paused. Taking a deep breath, he called out softly. His voice echoed into the darkness. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then he heard it, chirping, excited, high-pitched chirping that grew louder as the hatchlings recognized his voice. Jiho stepped inside, his flashlight illuminating the tunnel. He didn't need to go far. The 3 hatchlings came bounding toward him, still covered in bits of dried glitter from yesterday. The red one reached him first, skidding to a stop and looking up at him with bright, expectant eyes. The blue-gray one circled around him, sniffing at his backpack. The silver one hung back a bit, more cautious but clearly curious. Behind them, filling the tunnel with her massive presence, came Kyra, her golden eyes fixed on Jiho immediately. He froze, remembering yesterday's terror. But Kyra didn't growl. She simply watched, her head tilted slightly to one side. Jiho slowly lowered himself to sit cross-legged on the tunnel floor. The hatchlings immediately swarmed him, chirping and pawing gently at his backpack. He laughed, the sound echoing off the stone walls. Carefully, he unzipped the backpack and pulled out the first container of glitter. This one was full of blue and green sparkles that reminded him of ocean water. The hatchlings went silent, their eyes locked on the container. Jiho unscrewed the lid and poured a small amount onto the ground in front of him. The effect was immediate. The red hatchling dove forward, rolling in the sparkles with pure joy. The blue-gray one carefully picked up glitter with its claws, holding it up to watch it catch the light. The silver one cautiously approached and touched a single sparkle with its nose before sneezing adorably. Kyra moved closer. Jiho's breath caught in his throat, but he forced himself to remain calm. The great dragon lowered her massive head, bringing her face level with the boy and her babies. She sniffed at the glitter, her nostrils flaring. Then she looked at Jiho, and he could have sworn she nodded slightly. Encouraged, Jiho poured more glitter, making a small pile. Then he held out his hand, palm up, with a pinch of sparkles resting in it. The red hatchling immediately waddled over and touched its nose to Jiho's palm. The glitter stuck to its scales, creating a little patch of blue and green on its red snout. The hatchling chirped happily and licked Jiho's hand with a warm, slightly rough tongue. Jiho couldn't help but giggle. The sound made the other 2 hatchlings braver. Soon all 3 were taking turns touching the glitter in his hand, getting the sparkles all over their faces and feet. Kyra watched this interaction carefully, but she made no move to stop it. Time passed without Jiho noticing. He showed the hatchlings different colors of glitter, watching their reactions. The red one seemed to love anything warm-colored, orange and red and gold. The blue-gray one preferred cooler colors, blues and purples and silver. The silver one liked everything shiny, regardless of color, but showed special interest in clear crystals and white glitter. Jiho pulled out the glass beads next. He spread them on the ground, and the hatchlings investigated with serious concentration. The red one tried to eat one, but quickly spit it out, shaking its head. The blue-gray one used its claws to sort them by color, creating small piles. The silver one discovered that rolling the beads made them move, and spent several minutes chasing them around. Then Jiho heard something that made his heart stop, a voice calling his name. Mirei's voice, distant but growing closer. Panic flooded through him. He had been so focused on the dragons that he hadn't realized how much time had passed. Mirei must have returned from her supply run and found him missing. She had probably checked his tracking chip, the small device that old colonists wore for safety. She was coming to find him. Jiho scrambled to his feet, startling the hatchlings. Kyra immediately tensed, rising to her full height. Her protective instincts kicked in as she sensed the boy's fear. Mirei's voice came again, much closer now. Jiho could hear her footsteps crunching over the rocks outside the cave. The hatchlings huddled together, confused by the sudden change in mood. Kyra's lips pulled back, revealing her teeth. Then Mireille appeared at the cave entrance, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. She saw Jiho first, relief flooding her face. Then her light found the hatchlings. Then it traveled up and up and up until it illuminated Kyra's massive form towering over them all. Mireille's face went pale. Her hand dropped to the stunner on her belt, a weapon all colonists carry for protection against dangerous wildlife. But she didn't draw it. She stood frozen, her mind trying to process what she was seeing. A small human child standing in a dragon's nest with 3 hatchlings playing at his feet, and the mother dragon, fierce and protective, positioned to strike but not striking. Jiho did the only thing he could think of. He held up his hands, showing he meant no harm. Then he spoke quickly, his words tumbling over each other. He explained about finding the cave yesterday, about the glitter, about how the hatchlings weren't dangerous, just curious, about how Kyra had let him live, had even seemed to welcome him back. Mireille listened, her hand still hovering near her stunner. Her eyes darted between Jiho and Kyra, assessing the situation. She had been a pilot in the colonial fleet before taking this posting. She had seen combat, faced danger without flinching. But nothing had prepared her for this. Kyra growled softly. It wasn't the terrifying roar from yesterday. It was almost a question, a warning, but also an invitation to prove herself. Jiho reached into his backpack one more time. He pulled out the last container of glitter, this one filled with gold and silver sparkles. Slowly, carefully, he walked toward Mireille. The hatchlings followed him, chirping curiously at the new human. Kyra's eyes tracked every movement, but she didn't advance. Jiho stopped halfway between the dragons and Mireille. He opened the container and poured some glitter into his palm. Then he held it out, offering it to Mireille. Mireille understood. This was a test, a ritual, whatever meaning the glitter held for these creatures. It was significant. She took a shaky breath and stepped forward. Her legs felt weak, but she forced them to move. She reached Jiho and looked down at the sparkles in his hand. The red hatchling, the bravest one, approached Mireille. It sniffed her boots, then looked up at her with curious eyes. Mireille slowly knelt down, making herself smaller and less threatening. She reached out with trembling fingers and touched the hatchling's head. Its scales were warm and smooth, like polished stone heated by the sun. The hatchling chirped happily and nuzzled into her hand. The other 2 quickly joined, surrounding Mireille with their small bodies. She laughed, the sound shaky but genuine. Jiho sprinkled glitter over all of them, and the hatchlings danced with joy, their scales catching the light. Kyra watched this scene with her ancient, knowing eyes. She saw the second human treat her children with gentleness. She saw no weapons raised, no threats made. Slowly, the tension left her massive body. She lowered her head and made that soft rumbling sound again. Mireille looked up at the Dragon Mother, and something passed between them. An understanding, a recognition that they were both protectors of young ones, both willing to do anything to keep their charges safe. Jiho smiled, relief washing over him. He had been terrified that Mireille's arrival would ruin everything. Instead, it had made things better. Now there were 2 humans who knew the truth about Kyra and her hatchlings. 2 humans who could help protect this incredible secret. As they finally prepared to leave, the hatchlings followed them to the cave entrance, reluctant to see their new friends go. The silver one picked up a piece of glitter in its mouth and dropped it at Mireille's feet, a gift in return for the gift received. Mireille picked up the sparkle carefully, holding it like the precious treasure it was. She looked at Jiho, then back at the dragons. She knew their lives had just changed forever. This discovery, this connection, it was bigger than anything the colony had experienced. They walked back to Haven Station in silence, both lost in thought. Behind them, from the cave entrance, came the sound of chirping and a deep, resonant hum. The dragons were singing again, and now Jiho understood. It was a song of welcome, a song of new friendship, a song of hope for what might come next. The footage from Mireille's helmet camera spread through Haven Station like wildfire. Within hours, every colonist had seen the incredible images of Jiho sitting peacefully with the dragon hatchlings while their massive mother watched over them. The recording showed Mireille's cautious approach, the hatchlings greeting her with curiosity instead of fear, and most remarkably, the moment when Kyra made a deep, gentle rumble that seemed almost like approval. Hannah watched the video 17 times. Each viewing brought a new wave of emotions: terror at the danger her son had faced, pride at his bravery and compassion, wonder at what this could mean for human Skywing relations. As a xenobiologist, she understood the magnitude of what had happened. As a mother, she wanted to lock Jiho in his room and never let him near those creatures again. Taeyong called an emergency meeting in the station's main conference room. Every department head attended. They crowded around a large table, talking over each other, debating what should be done. Some argued that the cave should be marked as off-limits, that they couldn't risk colonists' lives on the hope that one friendly dragon represented the whole species. Others insisted this was a breakthrough they had been hoping for since landing on Drakenris. Doyan, the station's linguist specialist, sat quietly in the corner during most of the meeting. He was a thin man with glasses that constantly slipped down his nose. While others argued about safety protocols and diplomatic possibilities, Doyan replayed the audio from Mirei's recording over and over. He isolated the sounds Kyra had made, running them through analysis software on his datapad. Finally, he stood up. The room didn't notice at first, too caught up in their debate. Doyan cleared his throat loudly. When that didn't work, he shouted. Everyone stopped and stared at the normally quiet linguist. Doyan's hand shook as he held up his datapad. He told them he had found something. The sound Kyra made weren't just animal noises. They followed patterns. Complex patterns with repeating structures and variations that suggested grammar and syntax. The Skywings weren't just intelligent creatures. They had language. The room fell silent. Hannah felt her heart race. Taeyong leaned forward, demanding to know if Doyan was certain. The linguist nodded, pushing his glasses up nervously. He explained that he needed more samples, more recordings, but the preliminary analysis was clear. If the Skywings could communicate with such sophistication, they might be far more advanced than anyone had assumed. Jiho had been sitting outside the conference room, waiting with Mirei. When the door opened and his mother emerged, he could see tears in her eyes. But she was smiling. She hugged him tightly and told him he might have just changed everything. Over the next 2 weeks, Jiho visited the cave every day. Mirei always accompanied him, and often Doyan came too, carrying recording equipment and his ever-present datapad. The hatchlings grew to expect their visits. The red one, which Jiho had started calling Ember, would race to greet them first. The blue-gray one, Storm, preferred to observe before approaching. The silver one, Frost, had become particularly attached to Mirei and would curl up in her lap whenever she sat down. Kyra allowed these visits, watching carefully but never interfering. Doyan spent hours recording her vocalizations, building a database of sounds and attempting to identify meanings. He discovered that she made different sounds for different situations. A low rumble meant contentment. A sharp chirp was a warning to her hatchlings. A longer, melodic hum seemed to be a greeting or acknowledgement. Jiho brought different gifts each time. He discovered that Ember loved anything red or orange, especially smooth red stones he found near the volcanic vents. Storm was fascinated by blue crystals and would arrange them in K-ful patterns. Frost collected anything that sparkled, building a small hoard in the corner of the nest. But it was Hannah who made the most important discovery. She had been studying the planet's geology and ancient rock formations. One day, she found cave paintings in a canyon system 50 kilometers from Haven Station. The paintings showed Skywings, but they also showed something else. Symbols, writing. The painting depicted Skywings using tools, building structures, and what looked like ceremonies or rituals. Hannah brought her findings to the team. The implications were staggering. The Skywings weren't just intelligent. They had civilization, culture, history, and humans had been treating them like animals, like obstacles to be studied and catalogued. Everything changed when the Galactic survey ship arrived. It appeared in orbit without warning, a massive vessel bearing the logo of the Colonial Mining Corporation. Captain Bowman contacted Haven Station and informed them he was here to conduct resource surveys. The planet had been flagged as having valuable mineral deposits, and the corporation wanted to begin extraction operations within the month. Taeyong tried to explain about the Skywings, about Jiho's discovery and the evidence of their intelligence. Bowman listened with barely concealed impatience. He acknowledged the report but dismissed its significance. one friendly dragon, and some old cave paintings didn't constitute proof of sapient species status. Until the Galactic Council officially recognized the Skywings as intelligent beings with rights, the planet was open for corporate development. Jiho didn't understand all the politics, but he knew something bad was happening. He saw the worry on his mother's face, heard the angry discussions between Taiyang and the survey team. When he asked Mireille what was wrong, she knelt down and explained it simply. The people from the big ship wanted to dig into the mountains. They wanted to take rocks and metal from the ground. But doing that would hurt the Skywings, would destroy their homes and nesting grounds. That afternoon, Jiho ran to the cave. He needed to warn Kyra somehow, even though she couldn't understand his words. But when he arrived, breathless and frightened, he found something that stopped him in his tracks. Kyra wasn't alone. 3 other adult Skywings had joined her in the cave. They were slightly smaller than her, but still enormous. Their scales were different colors, deep green, bronze, and midnight blue. They all turned to look at Jiho as he entered, and for a moment he felt the same terror he had experienced during his first visit. But Kyra moved between Jiho and the other dragons. She made a series of sounds, complex vocalizations that Doyon's equipment would have recorded with fascination. The other dragons listened, their eyes fixed on the small human child. Then, one by one, they settled back, mimicking Kyra's posture of watchful but non-aggressive observation. The hatchlings seemed excited by the presence of other adults. They chirped and showed off their collections of sparkly treasures, apparently proud of what they had accumulated. Ember brought a red stone to the green-scale dragon. Storm arranged blue crystals in a pattern for the bronze one. Frost offered glitter to the midnight blue dragon. Mireille arrived minutes later, followed by Doyon with his recording equipment. They both froze at the sight of multiple adult Skywings in the cave. But Kyra made that gentle rumble again, and the tension eased slightly. Doyon's hands trembled as he activated his equipment. He whispered to Mireille that this was incredible, unprecedented. They were witnessing something that might be a formal introduction, a presentation of the hatchlings' new friends to other members of their community. The green-scaled dragon approached Jiho slowly. The boy's instinct was to run, but he forced himself to stand still. The dragon lowered its massive head, bringing one enormous eye level with Jiho's face. They looked at each other for a long moment. Then the dragon made a sound, different from any Jiho had heard before. It was almost musical, rising and falling in a pattern that felt deliberate. Doyon gasped. He played back the recording immediately, his fingers flying over his datapad. The sound pattern matched one of the complex vocalizations Kyra had made earlier. If Doyon's preliminary translations were correct, it might mean something like see or understand or perhaps recognize. Over the next hour, each adult dragon examined the humans carefully. They sniffed at them, studied them, listened to their voices. The bronze dragon seemed particularly interested in Mireille's equipment, carefully touching the recording devices with one claw. The midnight blue dragon watched Doyon's frantic note-taking with what looked like amusement. Then Kyra did something extraordinary. She walked to the back of the cave and returned carrying something in her mouth. It was a large piece of crystal, perfectly clear and shaped almost like a star. She placed it carefully on the ground in front of Jiho. The boy understood immediately. It was a gift, a return for all the glitter and stones and treasures he had brought. His eyes filled with tears as he picked up the crystal. It was heavy and warm, and it caught the light from Doyon's equipment, throwing rainbow patterns across the cave walls. Jiho bowed, the way his grandmother had taught him to show respect. He didn't know if dragons understood the gesture, but it felt right. Kyra made a sound that might have been approval, but their peaceful moment was shattered by a distant explosion. The sound echoed across the mountains, causing rocks to shake loose from the cave ceiling. The hatchlings squeaked in fear, and the adult dragons immediately became alert, their bodies tense and ready for danger. Another explosion followed, closer this time. Then another. Through the cave entrance, Jiho could see dust rising from the mountainside in the distance. The survey team had begun their seismic testing, setting off charges to map the underground mineral deposits. Kyra roared. It wasn't the warning roar she had given Jiho during their first meeting. This was different, louder, fuller, and from outside the cave, from all across the mountain range, other roars answered. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. The Skywings were calling to each other, and the message was clear. Their home was under attack, and they would not allow it to continue. The fragile peace that Ji-Ho had helped create was about to be tested in ways none of them could have imagined. The sky above Drakenris filled with wings. Dozens of adult sky wings rose from their hidden nests across the mountain range, their roars shaking the air itself. Ji-Ho watched from the cave entrance as they circled overhead, their scales flashing in the sunlight like living jewels. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Kyra pushed the hatchlings deeper into the cave with her nose, making urgent sounds that needed no translation. She was telling them to hide, to stay safe. The 3 babies chirped in protest, but obeyed their mother. Ember looked back at Ji-Ho with worried eyes before disappearing into the shadows. Mireille grabbed Ji-Ho's arm, pulling him away from the entrance. They needed to get back to Haven Station immediately. But as they turned to leave, another explosion rocked the mountain. This one was much closer, and the shockwave knocked them both to the ground. Rocks tumbled from above, and Doyen screamed a warning. The green scale dragon moved faster than anything that large should be able to move. It spread its wings over the humans, shielding them from the falling debris. Stones bounced harmlessly off its armored scales. When the rumbling stopped, the dragon lifted its wing and looked down at them, checking to see if they were hurt. Ji-Ho stared up at the creature in wonder. It had protected them, saved them. Mireille seemed equally shocked, her mouth open in disbelief. Doyen's recording equipment had been knocked from his hands, but his eyes were wide with amazement. Another series of explosions echoed across the mountains. The survey team was continuing their wake, apparently unaware or uncaring about the reaction they were causing. Through the cave entrance, Ji-Ho could see sky wings diving toward the source of the noise. Their roars had changed from alarm to anger. Mireille's communication device crackled to life. Taiyang's voice came through, urgent and demanding. Where were they? They needed to return to Haven Station immediately. The sky wings were attacking the survey equipment. Captain Bowman had authorized defensive measures. Things were getting dangerous. Defensive measures. Ji-Ho felt sick. That meant weapons. That meant the survey team would shoot at the dragons, at creatures who were only trying to protect their homes and families. They ran from the cave, the adult dragons watching them go. The journey back to Haven Station took 20 minutes that felt like hours. They could hear the sounds of conflict echoing across the landscape. Energy weapons firing. Dragons roaring in pain and rage. More explosions as the survey team tried to drive the creatures away. Haven Station was in chaos when they arrived. Colonists rushed back and forth, securing equipment and sealing emergency hatches. Through the observation windows, Ji-Ho could see smoke rising from the northern mountains where the survey team had been working. Several skywings circled overhead, clearly agitated but not attacking the station itself. Hannah found Ji-Ho immediately, pulling him into a crushing hug. She had been terrified when the fighting started, knowing he was out there with the dragons. She checked him for injuries, her hands shaking. When she was satisfied he was safe, she led him to the conference room where Taiyang was coordinating with the survey ship. Captain Bowman's face filled the main screen. He was a hard-looking man with gray hair cut military short. His expression showed no sympathy as he reported the situation. 3 pieces of survey equipment had been destroyed. 2 members of his team had minor injuries from dragon attacks. He had ordered his people to fall back, but maintained that the skywings were dangerous animals that needed to be controlled. Taiyang argued back, his voice tight with anger. The skywings weren't animals. They were intelligent beings defending their territory. The explosions had disturbed their nests, threatened their young. Any species would react the same way. The survey needed to stop immediately while they worked on proper communication. Bowman laughed, a cold sound without humor. Proper communication with lizards? He had reviewed Haven Station's reports about Ji-Ho's discovery. 1 friendly dragon, and some cave paintings didn't prove sapience. Until the Galactic Council officially recognized the skywings as intelligent beings, they were just wildlife, and wildlife didn't have rights that superseded corporate mining interests. Ji-Ho couldn't stay quiet anymore. He stepped forward, his young voice cutting through the adult conversation. He told Captain Bowman he was wrong. The dragons weren't just animals. Kyra understood them. She had stepped aside to let him meet her babies. She had given him a crystal as a gift. The other dragons had protected him and Mireille from falling rocks. Animals didn't do those things. Bowman looked at the boy on his screen with something close to contempt. He told Jiho that children didn't understand how the galaxy worked. The mining corporation had legal rights to survey this planet. If the creatures here couldn't be reasoned with, they would be relocated or eliminated. That was how colonization worked. Hannah stepped forward, her face pale with fury. She told Bowman he was talking about genocide, about destroying a species that might be as intelligent as humans. She had evidence, recordings, analysis. If he would just stop the testing for a few days, give them time to present their findings to the Galactic Council. But Bowman shook his head. Time was money. Every day a delay cost the corporation credits. He was suspending operations for 24 hours out of respect for Haven Station concerns. But if the creatures attacked his team again, he would respond with lethal force. The screen went dark as he ended the transmission. The room erupted in angry voices. Some colonists argued they should physically block the survey team. Others worried about the legal consequences of interfering with corporate operations. Taeyong tried to maintain order, but everyone was talking at once. Doyon stood up suddenly, his quiet voice somehow cutting through the noise. He said he had an idea. What if they could actually talk to the Skywings? Not just record their sounds, but communicate? He had been analyzing Kyra's vocalization for weeks. With the right equipment, he might be able to create a translation device, something that could turn human speech into Skywing sounds and vice versa. Hannah immediately understood. If they could communicate directly with the dragons, they could explain what was happening. They could negotiate. Most importantly, they could record a conversation that would prove beyond doubt that the Skywings were intelligent beings. The Galactic Council would have to listen then. Taeyong approved the plan immediately. He gave Doyon access to Haven Station's full technical resources. The linguist rushed off to the engineering bay, already calling out instructions to the station's technicians. They had 24 hours to build something that normally took months of research. Jiho couldn't just sit and wait. He told his mother he needed to go back to the cave. Kyra needed to know they were trying to help. She needed to know that not all humans wanted to hurt her and her family. Hannah started to refuse, but then she saw the determination in her son's eyes. He had started this connection with the Skywings. Maybe he needed to be part of saving it too. Mireille volunteered to take him, and Taeyong reluctantly agreed. But this time, they took a full security team and a medical kit. The situation was too dangerous to take chances. The journey back to the cave felt different now. Smoke drifted across the landscape from the destroyed survey equipment. They saw 2 Skywings circling in the distance, their movements tense and alert. The creatures were on edge, ready to attack anything that seemed threatening. When they reached the cave, they found Kyra pacing at the entrance. Her golden eyes locked onto them immediately, and she roared a warning. But it was different from her usual roars. There was pain in it, desperation. Jiho approached slowly, his hands raised to show he held no weapons. He called out to Kyra softly, using the gentle tone he always did. The great dragon stopped pacing. She looked at the boy, and Jiho saw something in her eyes that made his heart break. Fear. She was afraid for her hatchlings. Another adult Skywing appeared from inside the cave, the bronze-colored one they had met earlier. It limped slightly, and Jiho saw a burn mark on its wing. One of the survey team's weapons had hit it. The dragon made a low, pain sound. Mireille immediately opened the medical kit. She knew the station's equipment wouldn't work perfectly on alien biology, but she had to try. She moved slowly toward the injured dragon, showing the medical supplies. The bronze dragon tensed but didn't retreat. It looked at Kyra, who made a soft rumble. Permission. Jiho watched as Mireille carefully cleaned and bandaged the burn. The dragon flinched but held still, seeming to understand she was trying to help. When she finished, the bronze dragon touched her shoulder gently with its nose. A gesture of thanks. Kyra made a long, complex series of sounds. Jiho wished desperately that Doyon was here with his translation device. He felt like Kyra was trying to tell him something important. Ask him something. Maybe asking if the humans would stop hurting her people. Maybe asking if there was any hope for peace. Jiho did the only thing he could. He pulled out one more container of glitter from his pocket, the last one he had. He opened it and poured the contents on the ground between them. Gold and silver sparkles, catching the fading sunlight. Kyra looked at the glitter for a long moment. Then she called into the cave. Ember, Storm and Frost emerged cautiously. They saw the sparkles and chirped, but their sounds were subdued. Even the hatchlings understood something was wrong. Jiho knelt in the glitter, letting it cover his hands. He held them out to the babies, just like he had that first day. Ember approached first, as always. The little red dragon touched its nose to Jiho's palm, covering itself in gold sparkles. Storm and Frost followed, but this time felt different. It felt like goodbye. Jiho's eyes filled with tears. He didn't want this to end. He had found something precious here, something magical. The thought of Captain Bowman destroying it, of weapons fire and dead dragons, made him feel sick. Kyra lowered her massive head until it was level with Jiho's. They looked at each other, human child and dragon mother. And in that moment, Jiho made a silent promise. He would find a way to save them. Somehow, he would make the adults listen. He would prove that the Skywings deserved to live in peace. The great dragon seemed to understand. She touched her nose gently to Jiho's forehead, leaving a warm spot that tingled slightly. Then she made one more sound, soft and sad and somehow hopeful at the same time. As Jiho and Mireille left the cave, the boy looked back one last time. The hatchlings stood at the entrance, covered in gold and silver sparkles, watching him go. Behind them, Kyra stood tall and fierce, ready to defend her family against whatever came next. The image burned itself into Jiho's memory, and he knew he would carry it for the rest of his life. Doyan didn't sleep for the entire 24 hours. He worked in the engineering bay surrounded by scattered tools, half-assembled equipment, and dozens of coffee cups. His eyes were red and his hands shook from exhaustion, but he kept going. The translation device had to work. Everything depended on it. Jiho sat in the corner of the bay, watching. His mother had tried to make him rest, but he refused. He needed to be here, needed to see this through. Mireille brought him food that he barely touched. His mind kept returning to the cave, to Kyra's sad eyes and the frightened hatchlings. As the first sun rose on the new day, Doyan finally held up a small device about the size of a human hand. It looked simple, just a speaker and a microphone connected to a processor. But it represented weeks of analysis compressed into one desperate night of work. He explained that it wouldn't be perfect. The translation would be rough, approximate, but it should work well enough for basic communication. Taeyong called Captain Bowman as soon as the device was ready. The mining captain appeared on screen looking annoyed at being contacted so early. He listened as Taeyong explained about the translation device, about the plan to communicate directly with the Skywings. Bowman's expression remained skeptical throughout. The captain said he would give them one chance, one demonstration. If they could prove the creatures were truly intelligent, capable of meaningful dialogue, he would halt operations and support their petition to the Galactic Council. But if the device failed, if the dragons were just animals making meaningless sounds, then the survey would resume immediately with full security measures. There was no time to practice or test. They had to go to the cave now, before Bowman changed his mind. Taeyong assembled a small team. Doyan with his translation device, Hannah to document everything scientifically, Mireille to pilot the transport, and Jiho because none of them believed Kyra would cooperate without him. Captain Bowman insisted on sending 2 of his own observers to verify the results. The flight to the mountains felt longer than usual. Jiho pressed his face against the transport window, searching for signs of the Skywings. He saw a few in the distance, flying in tight formations like they were patrolling, protecting their territory. When they landed near the cave, Kyra emerged immediately. She was not alone. At least a dozen adult Skywings surrounded the area, their eyes fixed on the humans climbing out of the transport. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut. One wrong move and the dragons would attack. Jiho stepped forward first, as he always did. He called out to Kyra in his gentle voice. The great dragon's golden eyes found him, and some of the tension left her posture. She made a low rumbling sound, and the other dragons relaxed slightly but remained alert. Doyan's hands trembled as he activated the translation device. He had programmed it with hundreds of Kyra's vocalizations, created algorithms to interpret patterns and context. Now came the moment of truth. He held the device toward Kyra and spoke slowly and clearly into it. The device processes words and produces a series of sounds, chirps and rumbles and deeper resonances. It sounded nothing like human speech. For a long moment, nothing happened. Bowman's observers smirked, already preparing to declare the experiment a failure. Then Kyra's eyes went wide. Her head tilted to one side in a gesture that was somehow very human. She made a sound, and the device translated it into a female voice with a slight electronic echo. "You speak the true voice." The words came out rough and simple, but they were words. Real words with meaning and intent. Everyone froze. Even Bowman's observers stopped smirking. They had just heard a dragon speak. Doyon nearly dropped the device in his excitement. He responded quickly, asking Kyra if she could understand them. The device translated his words into dragon sounds. Kyra responded immediately, her vocalizations flowing through the device as translated speech. "I understand. The small bright one brings the stardust. You are his herd." Jiho laughed despite the tension. Stardust. She meant the glitter. He took the device from Doyon and spoke into it himself, explaining that, yes, these were his family and friends, that they wanted to talk to her, to understand her people better. Kyra listened to the translated sounds carefully. Then she turned and called into the cave. The 3 hatchlings emerged, followed by the green-scaled, bronze, and midnight blue dragons they had met before. Kyra made a series of sounds that the device translated. These are the hatchlings who received the blessing. These are the nest guardians who witnessed the small bright one's kindness. They will hear the words of your herd. Hannah stepped forward, her scientific training taking over despite her amazement. She asked Kyra about her people, where they came from, how long they had lived on this world. The dragon's answers came slowly at first, as both sides learned to use the device effectively. Kyra explained that her people had lived on Drakenris for countless generations, so long that their history had become legend. They nested in the mountains, raised their young in the volcanic caves where the warmth kept eggs safe. They had watched the humans arrive, had debated among themselves what to do about the strange creatures building their settlement. Most Skywings had wanted to drive the humans away immediately, but the elders had counseled patience. They would watch and learn, see what kind of beings these humans were, whether they could be reasoned with or were just destroyers. When Jiho had entered Kyra's nest, she had been ready to kill him, to protect her hatchlings from the invader. But then he had given them the stardust, the sparkling gift that reminded her of the ancient ceremonies of her people. In their tradition, giving someone crushed star crystals was a sign of friendship and respect, an offering of peace. Jiho had unknowingly performed a sacred ritual. Kyra had been forced to reconsider everything she thought about humans. If a small human child, alone and afraid, could show such kindness and respect, perhaps his people were not all destroyers. One of Bowman's observers interrupted, demanding proof that this wasn't just trained responses, that the creature truly understood complex concepts. Hannah shot him an angry look, but Doyon had a better idea. He asked Kyra to explain something about her people that humans wouldn't know, something they couldn't have guessed or programmed. Kyra was quiet for a moment. Then she began to speak, and the device translated her words into a story. She told them about the long flight, an event from her people's ancient past. Her ancestors had not always lived on this world. They had come from somewhere else, fleeing a dying star. They had crossed a vast darkness, generation after generation, until they found this place, a world with mountains and warmth and caves and nesting. The Skywings had made this world their home. They had named it in their language. The word translated roughly to sanctuary. And now, after all of their ancestors had sacrificed to find safety, humans wanted to tear apart the mountains, to destroy the nesting grounds, to take the precious metals and leave nothing but empty holes in the ground. As Kyra spoke, her voice through the device carried such sadness and dignity that even Bowman's observers looked uncomfortable. This was no animal. This was a person, a mother, a guardian of history and tradition. This was someone with thoughts and feelings and memories. Hannah was recording everything, her hand steady despite the tears running down her face. This was the most important scientific discovery of her lifetime, the most important moment in human Skywing relations, and her son had made it possible. Doyon asked the question everyone was thinking. Could humans and Skywings share this world? Was there a way for both peoples to live here in peace? Kyra looked at Jiho for a long moment before answering. She said that the small bright one had shown her people that humans could be kind, could be trusted, but trust had to work both ways. If humans promised to respect the nesting grounds, to stop the explosions and the digging in sacred places. Then her people would welcome them as neighbors instead of invaders. Taeyong immediately began negotiating. He promised that Haven Station would work with the Skywings to map out protected areas, that humans would stay away from nesting sites and ceremonial grounds. In return, the Skywings could teach humans about the planet, share their knowledge of the land and weather patterns. But the agreement needed official recognition. That was where Captain Bowman came in. Taeyong turned to the communication link and demanded an answer. Had Bowman heard enough? Would he support their petition to the Galactic Council? There was a long pause. Then Bowman's voice came through, quieter than before. He said he had heard. He had witnessed. The recording of this conversation would be submitted to the Council immediately. The mining survey was hereby suspended pending official ruling on Drakenris's protected status. It wasn't a complete victory. The legal process could take months or even years. But it was a start. A real chance of peace. Kyra made a sound that the device didn't translate into words. It came through as pure emotion. Relief, hope, gratitude. She called into the cave, and more dragons emerged. Ember, Storm, and Frost bounded forward, chirping excitedly when they saw Jiho. What happened next would be recorded and shown across the galaxy. It would become the symbol of human Skywing friendship. Jiho knelt down, and the 3 hatchlings swarmed him, covering him in gentle nuzzles and happy sounds. Then Kyra approached and lowered her massive head, touching her nose to the boy's forehead just as she had before. But this time, she spoke through the device. Her words were simple but powerful. Small bright one, Star Dustbringer, you have saved my hatchlings. You have saved my people. We will remember. Always, we will remember. 5 years passed. Haven Station grew into a proper settlement, but it followed strict guidelines negotiated with the Skywing elders. No building in nesting areas. No loud machinery during hatching season. Regular cultural exchanges and shared celebrations. Jiho was 13 now, attending the newly established Interspecies Academy. He studied xenobiology and linguistics, following in his mother's and Doyon's footsteps. But he still visited the cave regularly, though it was different now. Ember, Storm, and Frost had grown into powerful young adults. Ember led training flights for young Skywings learning to defend their territory. Storm worked with human scientists, helping them understand the planet's ecosystem. Frost taught Skywing language to human children at the academy. Kyra had become something like royalty among her people. The mother who stepped aside, they called her, the one who chose trust over fear, friendship over violence. She led the Council of Elders now, making decisions about the future of both species on the world they shared. On the anniversary of that first meeting, Jiho returned to the cave carrying a small container. Inside was glitter, gold, and silver, just like always. Kyra greeted him with a gentle rumble, and her 3 grown children surrounded him with affectionate chirps. Jiho poured the glitter on the ground, and they all sat together, human and dragons, as the sparkles caught the light and created tiny rainbows on the cave walls. It had become a tradition, a reminder of how everything had started, with a simple gift given by a frightened boy to curious creatures, with a mother who stepped aside to let friendship bloom. And as they sat together in the cave where it all began, watching the glitter sparkle like stars, both humans and Skywings understood something profound. Sometimes the greatest changes come from the smallest gestures. Sometimes peace begins with a child's innocent heart. And sometimes all it takes to bridge the gap between 2 very different peoples is a willingness to step aside and let friendship in.